I had only owned my ranch for 3 days when the piece I had paid for vanished under the wheels of a golf cart. The morning had started perfectly, soft sunlight spilling across my private lake, mist curling above the still water, the kind of quiet that makes you believe in the good life. After 15 years of HOA fines, mailbox paint regulations, and arguments over grass height in my old subdivision, I thought I'd escaped. My new 50-acre property was proudly positioned outside any HOA zone. I'd even posted a sunrise photo with the caption, "Goodbye HOA, live forever." But as I carried my brand new kayak down to the lake's edge, already imagining the calm paddle ahead, the hum of tires over grass reached my ears. Out of the mist emerged a beige bullet of Authora Lorraine Voss, 73 years old, president of the Evergreen Meadows HOA, seated upright and furious in her personalized golf cart. She came to a screeching halt a few feet away, glaring like I'd committed arson. Her beige outfit matched the cart, her face frozen in a state of righteous outrage that only decades of unchallenged HOA control could forge. "Stop right there," she shouted, holding up a laminated ID badge like it had federal clearance. Confused but curious, I set the kayak down gently. "Can I help you?" I asked, as calmly as I could. "I'm Lorraine Voss, president of Evergreen Meadows Homeowners Association, and you're trespassing on our community lake." I raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, I believe you're mistaken. You're standing on my land. I just bought this ranch." The lake, her face changed colors, flipping from pink to crimson like a cartoon thermometer. "That's impossible. My husband had this lake surveyed. It belongs to Evergreen Meadows." I pulled out my phone to show her the deed, but she was already dialing 911. "Yes, hello. This is Lorraine Voss. I'm at the lake. There's a dangerous trespasser here threatening me with a weapon." I blinked in disbelief. "A weapon?" I looked down at the paddle in my hand. "He's trying to steal our community kayaks," she continued, voice trembling with fake sobs. I looked at the still-tagged kayak I'd just bought from a sporting goods store. She wasn't just mistaken, she was delusional. As she performed for the dispatcher, I decided not to engage and instead sat down on my cooler to enjoy the turkey sandwich I'd packed. Lorraine paced back and forth for 20 minutes, muttering about the nerve and entitled outsiders, strategically positioning herself between me and my own lake like she was holding a military line. "Nice dock," I said between bites, nodding toward the ornate structure extending into the lake, boat slips, covered seating, the works. Her chest puffed out. "My husband built it himself. It's the pride of Evergreen Meadows." But something felt off. That dock stretched far into the lake, too far. Just as I was beginning to suspect something, the sirens arrived. 2 county cruisers pulled up, and I recognized Deputy Clark, who'd been at my property closing. The moment he saw Lorraine, he exhaled so deeply it sounded like pain. "Mrs. Voss," he said wearily, "what is it this time?" Lorraine launched into her performance, finger trembling as she pointed at me. "He's trespassing, threatening me, stealing our lake." Deputy Clark turned to me, recognition dawning. "Mr. Malik, right? You just bought the Morrison Ranch." I nodded. Lorraine froze. "That's impossible," she said again. Clark shook his head. "Ma'am, this gentleman owns all 50 acres, including the lake. I was at the closing. You're the one trespassing." The silence that followed was glorious. Lorraine's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. "We have easement rights," she finally blurted. I raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. I specifically asked about easements during closing. There were none." She started backing away slowly, edging toward her cart. "This isn't over," she hissed. "My nephew's a lawyer. You'll be hearing from our legal team." Clark gave me a tired look. "Just so you know, she's called us out here 47 times in the last 2 years. She's persistent." After they left, I launched my kayak at last, but couldn't shake the feeling that the dock's placement was suspicious. As I paddled past it, I noticed a weathered sign, "Evergreen Meadows, private dock, residents only." And that's when it clicked. If Lorraine was so certain this lake was theirs, why the panic when I started asking questions? The next morning confirmed my suspicions. I was sipping coffee on my deck when I heard the unmistakable sound of multiple golf carts approaching like an HOA parade from a retirement community uprising. Leading the charge was Lorraine again, this time her cart decorated with American flags and a sign reading "Protecting Our Community." 3 other board members trailed behind her, all wearing matching Evergreen Meadows polos. I stayed in my chair. Lorraine approached like she was entering a courtroom, a thick manila folder in her hand. "Mr. Malik," she declared, "I have documentation proving Evergreen Meadows' legal right to this lake." She waved the folder dramatically. I offered her coffee. "I don't drink coffee with trespassers," she snapped. One board member, a timid woman in her 60s named Leela, tugged on Lorraine's sleeve. "Maybe we should talk first." Lorraine yanked her arm away. "Not this time." I set my cup down and stood. "Mrs. Voss, I'm asking you once, politely, to get off my property. You're trespassing, and I have security cameras recording everything." I gestured toward the cameras I'd installed just yesterday. Lorraine's face began its shifted from red to purple. "You can't threaten us. We have rights." That's when Deputy Clark pulled up again. He hadn't even stepped out of the car before Lorraine rushed him. "He's threatening us again," she cried. Clark got back slowly, clearly over this already. "Mrs. Voss, did you call 911 again?" "Yes, it's an emergency." Clark turned to me. "Are you threatening anyone, Mr. Malik?" I shook my head. "Just drinking coffee on my own deck." He sighed again, deeper this time. "Mrs. Voss, I've told you calling 911 for non-emergency is a crime. This is your final warning." Lorraine wasn't done. "He's stolen our lake. My husband built that dock with his own hands. It's all I have left of him." Her board stood awkwardly behind her. Finally, Leela whispered, "Maybe we should check the records again." Lorraine turned on her. "Are you calling my dead husband a liar?" The silence that followed was heavy. Clark cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I reviewed the records yesterday. This lake is entirely within Mr. Malik's property lines. Your HOA has no legal claim to it." Lorraine began sobbing, not quiet, dignified tears, but dramatic sobs echoing across the field. "This monster is stealing my memories." I was beginning to feel sorry for her until I remembered she tried to have me arrested for kayaking. "You and your board need to leave now before I have to start issuing citations," Clark said. As they prepared to retreat, one board member dropped a piece of paper near my deck. It was a survey drawing crudely made, dated 3 days prior, showing wildly incorrect property lines labeling the lake as Evergreen Community Lake. I took a photo before the wind could carry it off. That night, I started researching. Forums, apps, even a defunct blog called Surviving Lorraine painted a dark history: neighbors harassed, dogs poisoned, permit violations swept under the rug. The next morning, I hired a professional surveyor, my college buddy Saeed Khan. When he saw the name Lorraine Voss, he laughed so hard he almost dropped his donut. "You're dealing with her. She once tried to sue me for refusing to fake gazebo measurements." As we walked toward the lake, he told me she'd tried hiring him in 2019 to survey for a dock permit. When he told her the location was private property, she lost it and threatened his license. 3 months later, the dock mysteriously appeared: no permit, no authorization, just Lorraine pretending it was always there. He confirmed the dock extended 35 feet onto my land, the HOA only owning the first 5. "This is bad, bro," he muttered, planting flags. He pulled satellite imagery, old permit records, and code violations. Not only had the HOA built a massive dock illegally, they'd cleared trees, set up a beach, and even installed a water pump drawing from my lake to irrigate their common area on my land. I wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor. I was uncovering a full-blown HOA land grab, and I was just getting started. I barely slept that night, not from fear but from the strange mixture of anger and fascination. What I thought would be a quiet ranch life had turned into an HOA thriller, and I was somehow the lead character. By morning I had a folder full of evidence, a surveyor's flagged property line, and a suspicious gut feeling that Lorraine Voss's little dock was just the beginning. Saeed showed up again around 10 a.m. with his tablet and a serious expression. "Rehan, you're going to want to see this," he said before even walking up to the porch. He pulled up the satellite overlays on his screen. "That fake beach area, they cleared your trees for that, and according to county environmental records, this zone is protected wetland designation. If she didn't get special clearance, she broke about 5 different environmental laws." I stared at the image. That entire shoreline was technically mine, and Evergreen Meadows had treated it like their private resort. "Look at this too," he said, zooming in. "That pump house sits tapping water from your lake to irrigate HOA land. That's theft, and illegal under county ordinance." He was right. Saeed had also uncovered emails from the county denying the HOA's original dock permit, dated 2019, and logs from 2020 showing the dock mysteriously existing despite no legal approval. "They knew what they were doing," I said, "and they thought nobody would challenge it." Saeed nodded, chewing on his pen. "They got away with it because nobody before you had the resources, evidence, or honestly the patience. But now," I smiled grimly, "now we document everything." We spent the next few hours taking new measurements, photographing every inch of the dock, the shoreline, the illegal water lines, even the tire tracks left by Lorraine's golf cart from her little invasion. By mid-afternoon, I had a timeline that showed exactly how Evergreen Meadows had quietly seized part of my property and pretended it belonged to them. Later that day, I drove to the county records office and submitted a formal report including all the evidence Saeed and I had compiled. The woman behind the counter, a kind-looking clerk named Janice, glanced through the packet and said, "Oh dear, Lorraine again." I raised an eyebrow. "You know her," she snorted. "We all know her. Last year she filed a complaint because a neighbor painted their mailbox eggshell white instead of HOA white. There's literally no difference." I laughed, but she wasn't done. She also threatened to sue the planning department for not fast-tracking her gazebo permit. I think she thinks she's mayor or something. I left the office with a receipt for the formal property dispute submission and a vague sense of satisfaction. On my way home, I stopped at a local coffee shop and noticed someone staring at me. A man in his 60s, thin-framed glasses, and a weathered ball cap with the Evergreen Meadows logo. You Rehan Malik, he asked. Depends who's asking, I said with a smile. Name's Harold. I'm on the HOA board. Or was. He extended a hand. I shook it. Was. He nodded. I quit this morning. After your little meeting on the porch, I couldn't stomach it anymore. Lorraine's been out of control for years. That dock, she had it built without a vote. Just showed up one day and told us to tell residents it was legal. Why didn't anyone stop her? I asked. Harold sighed. People tried, but she's loud, aggressive, and threatening. And some folks are just tired. Others moved away. I heard about the Johnsons and the Patels, I said. He nodded, and Mr. Chan. Stroke hit him the same week he filed his complaint. Lorraine told everyone it was stress from his lawsuit. We sat in silence for a moment. Do you have any documentation? I asked. Emails, internal memos, anything. Harold reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. This has all the internal board emails for the last 3 years. I already made myself a copy. I'm done protecting her. I thanked him and promised to keep his name out of it. That night, I reviewed the flash drive and found gold. Dozens of emails from Lorraine directing board members to lie about the dock's permits, to ignore residents' complaints, and one particularly damning message where she admits the county denied the application but insists Arthur said it's fine. And that's all that matters, Arthur being her deceased husband. There were also emails about how to silence Saeed after his original survey plans to discredit him, file complaints, even contact his licensing board, and a string of threads mocking the residents who dared push back, calling them weak, emotional, and in one case, a waste of oxygen. This wasn't just an HOA board, it was a small, controlled cult of fear, and Lorraine was the leader. I backed up the drive and contacted an attorney named Carla Desai, a local property law expert recommended by Saeed. She met with me the next day and spent 2 hours reviewing my materials. Her face went from neutral to concerned to utterly baffled. This is probably the most clear-cut property violation case I've seen in years, she said. You have survey records, a denied permit trail, physical encroachment, and a mountain of correspondence. If they push back legally, we'll win. What if they don't push back? I asked. Carla smiled. Then we file a cease and desist, notify the county, and make it public. Trust me, once the HOA residents realize their fees are funding an illegal dock and a lawsuit, they'll turn on her. The next day, Carla filed the paperwork. A cease and desist letter was sent to the HOA's legal address, and we submitted a complaint to the county's Building Code Enforcement Department. Within 48 hours, an inspector was dispatched. He walked the shoreline with Saeed and me, took notes, photos, and confirmed the electrical wiring was not only unauthorized but dangerously exposed. This is a safety hazard, he said flatly. I'll be writing this up for immediate removal. That evening I heard shouting near the lake. I walked out to find Lorraine standing at the edge of the dock. 2 men behind her, contractors by the look of their gear, arguing with the inspector. This dock is staying, Lorraine screamed. It's mine. The inspector calmly handed her a notice. Ma'am, you have 7 days to remove all structures on Mr. Malik's property or face daily fines. Up to $5,000. Lorraine looked like she might explode. I built this with my husband. You can't take this away from me. You built it on land you don't own, I said quietly. She spun toward me, her voice trembling. You think you're so clever, but you're nothing here. We built this community. You built it illegally, I replied. And it ends now. She stormed off, but not before turning back and shouting, You'll regret this. You don't understand who you're messing with. I think I do, I muttered, watching her disappear into the mist like some HOA ghost. Over the next week, things escalated. HOA residents began knocking on my gate, apologizing. Some were angry not at me, but at Lorraine. Word had spread. One woman told me, we had no idea. She told us it was all approved. Another said, she increased our fees last year to maintain the shoreline. Now I know where that money went. Someone even sent me a scanned newsletter Lorraine had mailed out 2 years ago, boasting about the new dock's strategic location and calling it the symbol of evergreen pride. Residents began demanding an emergency board meeting. The HOA bylaws allowed it if 15% of members signed a petition. Within 2 days they had over 40%. Carla guided me through how to share my evidence legally without instigating further harassment. And I held a small press briefing in front of the ranch gate, just me, Carla, Saeed, and about a dozen neighbors with questions. I presented the facts, survey proof, county permits, internal HOA emails, inspector findings. I didn't make it personal, I didn't need to. The facts spoke loudly enough. That night, Lorraine drove by my property 3 times, stopping once to take photos. I watched from my porch, unmoved. The final straw came the next day when code enforcement posted an official removal notice on the dock itself, 7 days, or the county would dismantle it, by force. The moment the county posted the official notice on the dock, the atmosphere in Evergreen Meadows shifted like a thunderstorm building over the prairie. By midday, the HOA Facebook group, which I had no access to but was told about by a sympathetic resident named Jenna, was on fire. Posts like, Did Lorraine lie to us? And where's our money actually going? Started flooding the feed. A board member named Anthony, who had until then stayed in Lorraine's shadow, resigned publicly and posted screenshots of his resignation letter stating he could no longer be part of unethical decisions. That same evening, I got a quiet knock on my gate. It was Harold again, holding a box of files. "These are the hard copies," he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Meeting minutes, original budgets, everything she tried to bury. Some of this goes way beyond the doc." I let him in, and over coffee, we went through everything. There were strange budget line items marked miscellaneous shoreline upkeep, with payments to companies that didn't seem to exist. One invoice was for $8,400 for lake preservation treatments, but there was no sign of any such work being done, and the supposed company wasn't listed with the state. Carla, my attorney, later confirmed it was likely a shell operation. The next day, a group of HOA residents delivered a formal petition demanding Lorraine step down as president and calling for a special election. In response, Lorraine called an emergency HOA board meeting, but instead of hosting it at the community center as usual, she held it in her backyard, claiming security reasons. Only her most loyal supporters showed up. The rest, about 40 residents, gathered outside her fence and recorded the meeting from their phones. Lorraine tried to paint me as a threat, calling me an outsider trying to take what her husband built, but the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. One resident shouted, "What about the fake survey? Lorraine, you drew property lines with a ruler." Another held up a copy of the cease and desist order taped to a poster board. When someone tried to speak up in her defense, another resident pointed to the $8,400 invoice and demanded, "Where did the money go?" The meeting disintegrated into chaos. Meanwhile, the county began its countdown to dock removal. A small crew of inspectors came through midweek to finalize measurements, and during that visit, one of them noticed a small secondary line running from the irrigation system into a hidden corner of the HOA park that led to a further inspection, and the discovery of an illegal tap pulling water directly from my lake, not just for lawns, but for the HOA's decorative fountain and irrigation timers. This wasn't just an HOA squabble anymore. It was resource theft. The county launched a formal investigation. Carla filed an injunction to prevent further use of the dock or shoreline by HOA members, and she requested court-supervised mediation to resolve the broader property dispute. At this point, I wasn't even the one pushing things forward. The evidence had a momentum of its own. Local news picked up the story. First a small online article, then a bigger outlet ran a headline, "Homeowner battles HOA over stolen lake." They reached out to me for comment, and I gave them a simple quote, "I just wanted to paddle in peace." The story included drone footage of the dock with clearly marked property lines, overlaid footage taken by Saeed the day we did our survey. That image, a lawn dock jutting boldly across the line into my land, blew up on social media. When HOA Karens go too far became the running theme. Memes popped up overnight. Someone edited Lorraine's face onto the Titanic yelling, "This dock is unsinkable." Another one showed a cartoon HOA golf cart being towed by county officials. It was funny, yes, but it was also heartbreaking, because behind Lorraine's madness was a trail of intimidation, fake records, silenced neighbors, and years of unchecked control. And now, it was all unraveling. The next Saturday, I walked out onto my deck to find something unbelievable. Several HOA residents had shown up at the edge of my fence, not to protest, but to help. One carried trash bags, another brought gloves. Jenna, the woman who first messaged me about the Facebook group, stepped forward and said, "We don't support what she did. This mess, it's not who we are. Let us help clean it up." I hesitated, stunned, then opened the gate. Together, we started cleaning up the makeshift beach area the HOA had built illegally on my land. Residents pulled up rotten boards from a crumbling bench Lorraine had installed. Others began removing tiki torches and old plastic barriers stuck into the sand. It felt surreal. I'd been the enemy a week ago. Now I was. Maybe not a friend, but no longer the villain in their eyes. As we worked, one older man introduced himself as Thomas, a retired civil engineer. "I tried to speak up back in 2020, he said, "but she threatened to fine me for non-compliance. My wife made me drop it, but I knew she was full of it. She always said her husband handled the permits, but I knew Arthur. He wasn't a surveyor. He managed a vending machine. Roots." We both chuckled at that. By the end of the afternoon, the fake beach was gone. The tiki torches and trash piles, and my shoreline looked like it was breathing again. That night, I got an email from the county building department. The deadline was up. If Lorraine didn't remove the dock herself, they would do it by force the next day, and all costs would be charged to Evergreen Meadows HOA. Early the next morning, I set up a camera and waited. At 8:43 a.m., a flatbed truck and a crew of 5 arrived with power tools and demolition equipment. I sat on my porch sipping coffee as they began dismantling the illegal dock board by board. Lorraine arrived 10 minutes later in a frenzy, waving paperwork and yelling, "You can't do this. This is historic." The lead inspector barely looked at her. "It's illegal, ma'am, and dangerous. Step back." She tried to stop them physically, grabbing at a worker's sleeve. A police officer assigned to the removal gently pulled her aside. "Mrs. Voss, please don't escalate this." By noon, the dock was gone. All that remained were muddy pilings and a torn piece of wood still displaying the words Evergreen Estates Dock. Lorraine stood alone, her golf cart engine running, but she didn't leave. She just stood there, staring at the water, broken. I almost felt sorry for her but then I remembered the 911 calls, the lies, the threats, and the fake tears. She hadn't just tried to control a community. She had tried to take what wasn't hers and weaponized her grief to shield her from consequence. That evening, an emergency HOA vote was held in the community center. Lorraine didn't show. A new president was elected. Jenna. She stood at the podium and said, "It's time for transparency, for respect, and for never letting something like this happen again." Residents applauded. I watched the live stream online, feeling a strange sense of closure. The county assessed fines for multiple violations, and several HOA members sued Lorraine personally for mismanagement. She lost her position, her reputation, and her carefully maintained facade, but I didn't take joy in it. I took relief. I had bought my ranch for peace, and now, maybe, that peace had finally arrived. The days following the dock's removal were quieter than I expected, but the silence wasn't peace. It was tension shifting directions, like a storm that had passed overhead but still hovered at the edge of the horizon. Lorraine Voss had vanished from public view. No more parades in her golf cart or declarations of neighborhood sovereignty. Her name, once spoken with reverence and fear by the Evergreen Meadows HOA, now came up only in hushed, embarrassed tones. But the damage she'd done lingered. County code enforcement had issued multiple citations, not just for the dock but for unlawful landscaping, unauthorized construction near wetlands, and illegal water diversion from a privately owned lake. HOA board members were now under scrutiny, even the ones who claimed ignorance. Meanwhile, Jennifer, newly elected HOA president, didn't waste time. She arranged a town hall meeting, this time open to everyone, including me. She personally invited me to attend. "It's time the board stopped pretending you don't exist," she said on the phone. "You've shown more respect for this land than the last 5 boards combined." I hesitated, not out of anger, but because I wasn't sure how to stand in front of a group that had once stood behind Lorraine so blindly. But I agreed, and 2 evenings later I drove to the community center. The room was packed, not with hostility, but curiosity. I walked in expecting stiff stares, but was greeted with nods, even a few quiet thank yous. Jenna opened the meeting with calm, clear words. "We are not here to relive what happened, but to own it and to change it." Then she handed me the mic. I told them I didn't come to their community to fight. I'd chosen my property because I wanted to get away from HOA drama, not walk into the middle of it. But when Lorraine tried to treat my land as hers, I had no choice but to push back. I walked them through what I'd uncovered, not in anger, but with facts: the fake surveys, the illegal construction, the environmental damage. The residents sat in silence, processing the weight of it. Some were visibly shocked, others ashamed. One elderly man in the second row wiped tears as he whispered, "We trusted her." When I finished, Jenna stood beside me and said, "We owe you more than an apology. We owe you change." From there, the board proposed new transparency rules, including public access to all budgets, open voting on community projects, and third-party review of all future construction. I sat back down as the crowd voted unanimously in favor. But as the applause faded, a voice rose from the back. "And what about Lorraine?" It was Margaret, the same woman who had once flanked Lorraine like her personal security. She looked tired now, but more open. "Do we just forget everything?" Jenna paused, then said, "We don't forget, but we move forward with accountability. She'll face the legal consequences. We'll make sure of that." Margaret nodded slowly. "Then let's do better." That meeting marked a turning point, not just for them, but for me. I wasn't just the guy with the kayak anymore. I was part of the land's story now. In the weeks that followed, the HOA worked with the county to undo much of the environmental damage Lorraine had authorized. The fake beach was leveled, native trees were replanted, and the illegal irrigation system was dismantled. Jenna invited me to attend weekly updates, and I was surprised how natural it started to feel, being included, being heard. One morning I found a handwritten note taped to my gate. It read, "I'm sorry for everything, M." I didn't know if it was Margaret or someone else, but it didn't matter. It meant someone had finally seen the full picture. Then, just when I thought the saga was done, my attorney Carla called with news. "We received notice today. Lorraine's lawyer is offering mediation. She wants to avoid court." I was surprised, but not shocked. After everything that came out, especially the misused HOA funds and unauthorized dock, it made sense she'd want to settle quietly. Carla and I reviewed the offer. Lorraine was willing to pay for all environmental repairs, cover the cost of Saeed's surveys, and issue a written apology to be included in the HOA's official records. In exchange, she asked that we not pursue criminal charges for the forged survey and permit documents. I sat with it for a day. Part of me wanted to push further, to make sure she faced every possible consequence. but another part, the one that moved out here for peace, not revenge, just wanted to close the book. I told Carla we'd agree under one condition. Lorraine would also have to resign from any current or future HOA roles, effective permanently. Within 48 hours, she signed. Resignation letter was brief, typed, and emotionless, but tucked in the envelope was something else, a folded, handwritten note. I built that doc because it was the last thing Arthur and I talked about before he passed. I didn't know how to grieve. I only knew how to control. I'm sorry for taking it out on you. You didn't deserve that, Lorraine. I read it 3 times. It didn't change what she'd done, but for the first time, she wasn't hiding behind titles or fake authority. Just a grieving woman who went too far. I folded the note and put it in a drawer. Let it rest there, like the story that now had an ending. A week later, I finally took that kayak back to the lake. The water was still, the sun rising behind me. No sirens, no shouting, just silence, just peace. I paddled slowly, letting the ripples spread behind me. The dock was gone, the flags were gone. But what remained was something better. My land, respected, a community, healing, and a story that would live on, not as a battle, but as a warning, and a reminder that when people stand up calmly, firmly, and with truth, even the most overreaching power can fall. I looked back at the shoreline where a new sign had been installed with county approval. Private property, no trespassing. Protected watershed area. Underneath, a smaller wooden plaque, clearly made by hand, read, "Welcome to Lake Malik." I smiled. Months passed, and what once had been chaos settled into something unexpected. Calm, not silence, because Evergreen Meadows still buzzed with HOA updates, neighborhood garage sales, and committee chatter. But the tension, the edge that used to linger every time a golf cart rolled by my fence, was gone. Lorraine Voss disappeared from community involvement entirely. And while some folks still whispered about her downfall with a mixture of shock and sympathy, the overwhelming energy had shifted toward rebuilding, not the kind you do with tools, but the kind you do with truth. Jenna, the new HOA president, stayed in regular contact, not to police, but to partner. She sent me quarterly updates on water usage and invited me to speak during their annual meeting, not about the conflict, but about the importance of respecting boundaries, legal, personal, and emotional. I spoke softly, not as a victor, but as someone who'd learned that even peace has to be protected. Meanwhile, the county finished restoring the wetland buffer Lorraine's team had destroyed. Native grasses were reseeded, shoreline fencing was installed where needed, and Saeed, my trusted surveyor turned accidental warrior, was contracted to design new boundary signage that would both inform and discourage future encroachment. His signs were tasteful, wooden, environmentally friendly, and each one discreetly bore a carved date, restored 2025. We laughed about it over coffee one morning. "Man," he said, tapping his mug, "I knew this job would be memorable, but I didn't expect it to go viral." He wasn't wrong. The drone photo of the dock, overlaid with property lines, had been shared thousands of times. Someone even turned the HOA drama into a mini animated series on TikTok. And though I didn't ask for fame, the attention did something powerful. It made people in other states, other neighborhoods, realize they weren't alone. Emails began trickling in. People wrote to tell me about their own HOA nightmares. A woman in Nevada who got fined for planting the wrong kind of flowers, a veteran in Texas who was told to remove his flagpole, a young couple in North Carolina whose backyard swing set sparked a lawsuit. Some were angry, others just tired. Many said the same thing: "Your story gave us the strength to push back." I started replying, not as a legal expert but as a neighbor. Sometimes all people need is to be heard. Eventually, a small online forum took shape, a space for homeowners to share, connect, and swap resources on how to handle overreaching HOAs. We called it Respect the Line, not anti-HOA, not aggressive, just about balance. Lorraine never joined, of course. The last I heard, she sold her home and moved in with a relative out of state. Rumor was, she'd taken up quilting and refused to discuss the lake incident ever again. I didn't wish her harm. If anything, I hoped she found peace. Her note, the handwritten one about grief and control, stayed in my drawer, unread since the day I received it, but never thrown away. Some scars are better left as quiet reminders. As for my lake, it became a place of joy again. I paddled every morning that weather allowed. I even hosted a small gathering once, just a few neighbors, a potluck, some kids with fishing poles. No permits, no politics. Just people. One of the kids caught a sunfish the size of his hand and ran around screaming like he'd discovered treasure. His dad laughed and said, "This is the kind of HOA memory I can get behind." We all laughed. Even Harold showed up, now just a smiling old man with no board duties, holding a thermos of lemonade. "You did something good here," he told me quietly as we watched the sun go down. Not just for the land, for all of us. And I think he was right, because the land had been restored, the truth had been heard. And the fear of speaking up, of questioning the authority that hides behind clipboards and laminated badges that had been dismantled like the illegal dock that once stretched over stolen water. I often think back to that first morning, the mist over the lake, The absurdity of Lorraine's accusations, her voice shrieking he has a weapon, about a kayak paddle. It would be hilarious if it hadn't been so dangerous, but maybe the absurdity was part of the lesson. That control taken too far becomes comedy, and comedy becomes tragedy if no one speaks up. I had spoken up, I had stood my ground, literally. And in doing so, I'd reminded a neighborhood, a county, maybe even a few strangers across the internet, that property lines may be invisible on the ground, but they carry very real meaning. You don't defend them with anger, you defend them with truth, with patience, with paperwork, and with a paddle in hand, if necessary. One morning, not long after the snow melted and the grass turned green again, I walked down to the lake for my usual paddle. The air smelled like wildflowers and pine. The water was glass smooth. Before I launched, I noticed a small wooden box tucked into the edge of the old tree line. Curious, I walked over and opened it. Inside was a hand-carved sign, simple, elegant. It read, "Thank you for standing your ground. This lake is better for it." No name, no signature, just that. I placed the sign back in the box, closed the lid gently, and stood there for a moment, letting the breeze move across my face. And in that moment, I realized something important. This story hadn't just been about a dock, or an HOA or a legal line in the dirt. It had been about knowing what's yours, fighting to keep it with integrity, and refusing to be bullied by tradition disguised as authority. I stepped into my kayak, pushed off, and let the lake take me where it wanted. No one watching, no one shouting, just me, the water, and the knowledge that even the quietest man can shake the loudest system if he knows how to listen, when to speak, and where to stand. It felt like the land was mine, yet somehow they acted like it belonged to them, and I couldn't help but wonder how long this had been happening. When I asked Osen, my surveyor, he consulted his tablet again and began zooming in on a sequence of satellite images. They started small, he said, maybe just a little fishing platform. The image from 2018 showed a tiny 10 by 10 structure, technically illegal but small enough to avoid attention. Then 2019 rolled in, and there was a walkway. By 2020 there was a full dock with boat slips, a covered seating area, the whole 9 yards. Classic land creep, Osen muttered, shaking his head. Built piece by piece, hoping no one would notice until it was too late. By the time he completed his survey, we had records of at least 7 violations. As he packed up his gear, he turned to me with a smirk. My official report will be ready tomorrow, but my professional opinion, everything they've built, the dock, the pump house, the landscaping, it's gotta go, and they know it. Then, laughing as he climbed into his truck, he added, "Oh, and Zaid, when Marlene finds out you hired me, she's going to lose her damn mind. I'd pay good money to see that reaction." When the dust settled and his truck disappeared down the road, I stood there staring at the 35 feet of stolen waterfront, no longer wondering whether I'd bought into peace. It was clear. Now, I had inherited a cold war with a woman who thought herself queen of a community that had no claim to what she'd quietly invaded. But if Marlene Grant wanted to fight over property rights, she had picked the wrong man. I opened my phone and started calling attorneys. But first I called Osen again. "You mentioned she's done this to other people. Think they'd talk to me?" He chuckled. "Talk to you? They'd probably throw you a parade. I'll make a few calls." The next morning at exactly 7 a.m., a postal worker nervously delivered a letter to my porch and practically sprinted away. It was a cease and desist from Grant and Associates Law, which turned out to be Marlene's nephew, fresh out of law school. The letter was an embarrassing pile of legal gibberish, accusing me of trespassing, emotional harassment of a grieving widow, and the highlight, a demand that I stop all watercraft activity on Evergreen Estates, Community Lake and respect historical usage rights as established by the late Martin Grant. I was still laughing over the phrasing when I got a text from my neighbor Jim with a link. "Dude, you're famous." I clicked through and found a post on the Evergreen Estates community Facebook group, a zoomed-in photo of me kayaking, with the caption, "Dangerous anti-HOA extremist threatens our community. This man refuses to respect our property rights, and has harassed me, a 73-year-old widow, shared to warn others, but the comments not what she expected. Ma'am, this is a Wendy's," someone named Patricia wrote. Another said, "Marlene, is this why you called an emergency HOA meeting at 11 p.m. last week?" The best came from Bob_the_builder. "Isn't that lake not actually on our property? My kids ask about it all the time, but we're not allowed to use it." Some residents defended her, but others were furious, especially after someone posted the county's property map, clearly showing the lake on my land. That comment got deleted, but not before screenshots spread everywhere. Instead of diving into the social media mess, I headed straight to the county records office, where the front desk clerk Brenda smiled and said, "You must be Mr. Haroon. Word travels fast. You hear about the dock?" I raised an eyebrow. "You've heard." She leaned in. "Marlene was here yesterday demanding we fix the records." I showed her the plat maps from 1960. She accused me of forging them. She handed me a folder she'd already prepared, Evergreen Estates building history. One file jumped out, a 2019 permit application from the HOA requesting permission to build a community dock. The application clearly showed the dock extending well into what was then the Morrison property, now mine. The county's response was blunt: denied. Proposed structure falls entirely on land not owned by applicant. There was no follow-up, no resub, yet the dock had appeared just months later. Any record of a later permit? I asked. Brenda shook her head. Nothing. That dock is 100% illegal. But the real smoking gun was in another folder, contractor records from the same year. The dock had been built by Coastal Green Landscaping, a company not licensed for marine construction. They were landscapers moonlighting as dock builders, and the check that paid them. Not signed by the HOA, not by Martin, it was signed by Marlene Grant herself. Cross-referencing the HOA's bank statements revealed that $50,000 had been pulled from the HOA account that same week under lake maintenance. Only $30,000 had gone to Coastal Green. The rest gone, vanished. The residents who had paid special assessments for the dock, their money never touched the construction. Marlene had skimmed HOA funds, paid cash to an unlicensed contractor, and used the illegal dock to cement her control. There's something else, Brenda said, lowering her voice. She and her husband had a fence dispute back in 2015. Neighbors filed suit. Their security cameras got vandalized. Their dog got sick. They dropped the case. She didn't say it out loud, but I got the message. I spent the rest of the day scanning everything, backing it up, organizing it for legal action. The case was airtight. Building violations, permit, denial, environmental infractions, fraud. I was ready for war. That night, at 8 p.m., I got an email from Marlene, CCing the entire HOA board. Mr. Haroon, I am giving you one final opportunity to be reasonable. Remove your kayak and cease water activity, or we will pursue criminal charges for harassment and trespassing. Additionally, we will be forced to reveal certain information about your background that may prove embarrassing. You have 24 hours to comply. I forwarded it to my lawyer with a note. She just moved this from civil to criminal. His reply came instantly. Don't respond. This is textbook extortion. She just gave us a gift. The next morning I met with attorney Fahad Qurashi, who ran a prestigious firm downtown. We laid out the evidence on the table: permit denials, survey results, HOA embezzlement, contractor fraud, and now attempted extortion. Fahad smiled like a man who'd just found gold. Mr. Haroon, he said, this is a slam dunk, and we're not just going after the HOA, we're going after her personally. His strategy was brilliant. In addition to a formal cease and desist, he sent legal notices to every Evergreen Estates homeowner, informing them that they might be financially liable as members of the HOA. That same day, a panic rippled through the community. Marlene called an emergency board meeting, labeling it a national security emergency. I couldn't resist driving by. The parking lot was full. Through the windows, I saw her pacing, shouting, holding up papers. Residents were reading the legal notices I'd sent. Some looked angry, some looked scared, some looked betrayed. According to Jim's texts, the meeting lasted past midnight. She accused board members of being spies, claimed the county plat maps had been hacked, and even threatened to sue the cartographer. 3 board members resigned on the spot. Then Osen called. Dude, he said, barely containing his laughter. My cousin Derek's in construction. Marlene tried to hire him, offered him $20,000 cash to forge a backdated permit. He recorded everything. I played the audio file that night. Her voice was unmistakable. Nobody needs to know it's new. We'll say we found it in Martin's files. I sent the recording to Fahad. His voice was cold. We're reporting this to the DA. She just crossed into federal crime. He updated our legal notices, warning that any attempt to introduce fraudulent permits would result in criminal prosecution. The next day, 3 more board members quit. Then came the final straw. Marlene showed up at my gate with a rented truck, 3 strange men, and construction tools. My security cameras caught it all. She directed them to repair the dock, insisting they install new pilings directly on my property. I called the sheriff, who arrived just as the men started unloading. Mrs. Grant, he said, you're trespassing. This isn't maintenance, this is illegal construction. The workers backed off immediately. We don't do shady jobs, the foreman said. We're out. Marlene exploded. She screamed at the sheriff, the workers, the sky. This dock is a memorial to Martin. You're desecrating his memory. But here's the thing. The invoice showed that Martin hadn't built the dock. Sunset Marine had. She had lied to everyone. As she was escorted off my property, I knew we were approaching the end. I compiled all my documents into a presentation. Aerial maps, permit denials, survey flags, embezzlement trails, audio recordings. The next HOA meeting would be her downfall, and I was bringing the receipts.